Okay, so this is the default, the essentials, which is what Photoshop starts in. Toolbar over here on the left-hand side, your palettes and layers menus over here, and this a place to stick some additional stuff. I'm going to suggest that you start here and then add and take away from here things that you don't think you need. So I don't think we're going to need swatches, so I'll bring it out here and I'll just hit this X and it'll go away. For most of the work that I do, I don't find patterns to be very necessary. So I'm going to pull it out and I'm going to hit the X and it'll go away. Probably gradients as well. Just pull it out and get rid of it. I like having this toolbar closer to this side over here. We come up here, see the blue line that came up between those two bars? That tells you where it wants to attach itself. And I'm going to move this over and it should attach itself between the big workspace in the bottom one. So that's right here. So I've got the starts now of a toolbar that looks like it makes some sense. Properties is a feature that I'm using more and more. And I have found that because when it throws out its menu, it covers up what I'm using it to discover things with. I'm going to draw it up here to this corner and I'm going to attach it right there. So my properties panel is now over here at the upper left-hand side. I have the same issue with my actions. So I want to add actions panel to this. So I'm going to come up here to click on actions. So there's my actions panel. Collapse it down, actions. And I'm going to move it also. Now, see how the blue line came between those two pieces?
Mhm.
That's going to hold it there so I can find it. So now I don't think you're going to need library. So I'm going to take that out of here. And I'm just going to close it. I don't think you need adjustments here. So what I'm going to do is move them out, close them, and add my adjustments right there. Okay, so now I have a basic workspace. So this is the essentials. We've just made one here. So I'm going to call it a new workspace. These keys down here, if you have customized your keyboards, shortcuts, or your menus, or your toolbars, you want to click these things down to save them. I have shared with you that on my toolbar, because I keep losing the paint bucket tool,
Mhm.
I added it. And so I want to make sure that I keep that. So I'm going to click here and that'll remember that. And I also developed, we're going to work on a menu here in a few minutes. So I want to save that and any shortcut. So I find clicking these three to be a good idea. We're going to call this a PUG February. And I'm going to save it. We come up here in our list, we'll see that we have PUG February. So if I click on this, it goes back to the one we made. Isn't that pretty handy?
Now, Richard, can
Yeah.
you add things like I have Lumenzia, I don't
Yep.
use it very well, but I have Lumenzia.
Yep.
Can that be added similarly to what you just did, using it as one of these little, created into like an icon?
Actually, we're going to do that right now.
Oh,
So we're going to go in here to our plugins, and there's Lemenzia,
yeah.
and there's Lemenzia tablet there. So Lemenzia is loaded. So there's the icon for it right there.
Okay.
I could leave it there, or I could move it over to this pile. So there's
Ah,
Lemenzia. So now I have the properties panel. Let's click on it. So there it is, and it's out of my way.
yeah.
Goes back.
The actions panel
Here's my actions panel.
and the
And
Lumenzia panel.
that next there. Put that back. And here's the Lemenzia panel. And that's ready to go. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come up here to my windows and I'm going to pick I find this history panel to be incredibly useful.
Me too. Yeah.
So I'm going to take the history panel. I'm going to put it right here, make this a little smaller. And then I'm going to come up here to my pattern and I'm going to call this one a new workspace. And so I call the other one PUG Feb, and I'm going to add Loom because Lumosity is the big thing about this one. And I
Lumenzia.
want to save my keyboard, my menus, and my toolbars and save. Now I named it the same because I want them to sit in the stack together. So there's the one that we did. So that's how you move between those. Did that make a whole lot of sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's great.
All right. So the idea here is that I find working on the right-hand side with the tools I use all the time easiest because I'm right-handed. And so I don't have to travel all the way across the workspace to click to something. However, sometimes when I'm working on something, let's say I'm doing a thing like this and I want to, one of my actions, I can pull it out here and it doesn't cover up my other tools. So I'm finding this to be
Ah,
easier.
I was
And
just gonna ask you, why not move them over to the other
yeah,
side where they
I
hit
had
the-
them on the other side
Yeah.
all the time before. And if you look at most of my menus that way, but especially with this one, and we're gonna be using this on the properties of some things and having it over here so I can deal with the property like with a curve over here and see what the numbers are over here is proving to be a good way for me to work.
Hmm.
So
Yep.
that's
That's great.
that. All right, now on the actions, you've gotten at some point something called PUG, and you've gotten a PUG 1. So what I've started to do is try and get some directions written in, and I'm called this PUG 2023. My plan is to send this to all of you, have you add to it any of the things that I've sent you before that you like or use and that I haven't addressed yet, and then you can just get rid of your old folder. So for example, if I go here on to PUG 2, I have a zone system digital. So I'm going to take this from the one that I sent before, and I'm going to slide it down here into PUG. Okay, so that loaded it in here. So I can take any of the ones from these old ones and bring them in here. So you only have one folder. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay, now I've added this one up here, which basically is an explanation of how I'm setting things up. Remember, you put the cursor over the action you want to play, and you push the play button, and then you get these descriptions here.
Yep, very nice.
Okay, Richard, I have a question. So every new action, like the ones that you sent us before, and start with that little forward caret type thing?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, what they do is the caret, it's a fold down menu. Let me stop this now. For example, on the color map, I can click on this. Nice picture, isn't it?
Yeah, it's neat.
However, in our contests and things, it would really get demoted because it has too much saturation, especially here in the bamboos. So that would do better. So the grasses look a little bit more natural, as does the bamboo. So we're going to look at color casts. I'm going to hold, you can see I have a mask here. I'm going to hold down the shift key and click on the mask. It turns it off. It masks out the lady in the kimono with her umbrella because I really like the saturated colors there. So I've got the mask here. If I hold down the shift key and click on the mask, it turns it off. If I click it again, it turns it back on. If I hold down the alternate or the options key and click on the mask, it shows you the mask.
Mm-hmm.
Back here to my actions. And the first thing that I've added here are two called color map fine and color map coarse. Because sometimes when you're doing color work, it's very easy to get confused as to what colors you have because there's so many colors in this image. So I'm going to hit the one fine on there, and I'm going to press the play button. But now what you have is a map of the colors in that image.
Mm.
There you've got the reds and the various greens and the numbers. So that's the fine. That one off. I'm going to do the coarser one, play that action. So now what you have is a color map that breaks it down into more of its unique parts. So you can say, what's the dominant color in this image? Well, it's probably the greens. It's not the brown so much, although there's a lot of brown in it. It's not the yellows. You would have thought it was the red, but when we break it down just to the fewest number of parts, you can see that it wasn't. So that's a later one, and see how it's showing you that even green is more your dominant color, and the colors in here are the reds are in these browns.
So Richard, the other one was color map fine. Is that what I'm?
Well, that's one that that's what led me down to the thing, is to give you one that gave you more spots as opposed to just this very general one. I thought you might find it more useful.
Okay, and that one's just labeled color map.
And
Okay.
what does the stamp visible relate to?
Well, if you remember the last time,
Oh, yeah.
we had, so here we've got an image that we're going to play with here in a little bit. And I want to make that control shift alternate and the capital E, remember that?
Yep.
That's stuff. So I'm up here on my top layer, stamp visible.
Oh, okay, I know what could, okay, so you've just shortened it by just making it an action instead of hitting the 4 keys.
Yeah.
Okay,
And what this does is not only does it do that, it also names it. See, it's
Okay.
called stamp visible now.
okay, yep,
So it's one of you all had asked about that. We talked about the dodge and burn layers, the one with the gray background and one with the clear background. Super sharpening is the one that I use to sharpen bird's eyes. Been curious as to why anybody would want to add film grain. It can be an aesthetic device, but it can also be a way to bring back detail. So I'm going to add film grain here. Is that when you add film grain, can you see that it got more detail?
Mhm.
So it'll add detail and it'll also add some grain or texture to the image, which some people find aesthetically very pleasing. And so there are two basic grains. The fine grain is a small, see it up here in the gray area? It's just a very light dot pattern, which will help disguise noise, and because noise is random and this is not. And then the coarse grain is the grain that you normally find in darker areas on film. So let me turn it on and off here. See it coming in and out right in here? And that's a larger grain structure, and it's controlled with a blend if statement. And it's saying basically that not to have it impact anything in the real light colors, and then to transition from this lightness here of a 200 down to 150, so that the dark parts of the image will get the larger grain, but not the light parts. So blend if a really neat tool that we need to learn to use more. So that's why it's in this group.
Mhm.
I wanted to talk to you about customizing. So if you come into your Photoshop and edit, the bottom of the edit menu, you've got keyboard shortcuts. Those are the command and things that we've talked about, menus and toolbars. So let's take the menus. And in here, this is the name of the menu that I saved when I made this workspace. And so I'm going to come down here and I want to, if I click on this, this is the edit or the image menu that's right up here. And this is all of the commands that are in that. And this one is set to turn things off that I don't think I want to use. If we were to go up here and click on it, you'd see that the bitmap, grayscale, duotone, indexed color, and RGB are not on that menu. So let's go back and look at that. And you see they're not there. And I've colored them red so that I can tell that they're not there. I got them out of my way. Go back here and let's say that you decided that you really wanted to use these. Or you wanted to mark them red like I did. You come back here to edit, down to menus, and then here, so here they are here. I can turn them on. That's what this does. So that just turned those parts of that menu back on, and I can change their color here. There they are. You save that with your workspace and you can develop a custom menu.
Okay,
And
so
I have, go ahead.
you used red for ones that you're not using. What's the difference between the yellow and green ones?
One's yellow and the other one's green.
Are they just to highlight which ones you more frequently and you decided
Yeah.
to put them yellow so you can see them easier?
Yeah, basically, greens are for me usually the ones that I want to hit the most. So they
Okay,
pop out. And I have, you see this button here on the bottom to show everything. That just lets me know which ones I've turned off. Like, I'm reading a direction and it says, click on the place linked. And I'm going, I don't have a place link. Well, I don't have a place link because I turned it off. But if I hit here, show everything, show all menu items, click on this, the red ones pop up so I can see what I had turned off. And then if I decide, well, gee, I'm using this all the time, I can go ahead and turn it back on.
Mhm.
Mhm.
I think the color helps so that you're not having to read every line either.
Yeah,
Yes.
Kind
because there's some things I just don't use. Like here, show all menu items. I don't use 3D. I rarely use distort. Pixelate almost only when I'm making those color maps. It's about the only time I use that, or creating gradation that are bars rather than smooth is the only time I'll use that. So
And
that
do you
just,
use lens correction? Because I do that in Camera Raw. Is
well,
that
so do
why you
I.
don't-
So if you notice here, it's marked off. Let's look like
Okay,
here,
'cause
click
you're
back
using it
on. See, and
Okay.
I've just turned it back on because I'm trying to make this menu work. But if we go back to one of my menus that I use all the time, click, because when I click on this, it'll load the menu that I'm using, and this one's different. See, I've started changing what those colors are, and right now the ones that are not marked are the ones that are in this gray, and the ones that before were just plain are in this light gray. So I'm making this so that when I click on a menu, it's the same menu that you're looking at. I haven't done this one yet, so I've got all these things to add to it. So that's what. But if there are plugins I use here. I've marked them so I can find them easily. Chip Stanford this is his image, titled it "You're About to Be a Dad." Color, this kind of reddish hue in here came from the time of the day he shot it. So it was a color cast at this point in the day. So let's click on here, and if we could remove the color cast, we would get a more natural looking image without that impact on it. Although I like the color cast. So color casts aren't always a bad thing, but there are several ways to get rid of it, and I want to show you a couple right now. Take the image you want to do, and duplicate the layer. Because that's as a smart object, I'm going to rasterize it, which just turns it into a pixelated image. Okay, so it's the same picture, except I can't go back and edit my basic adjustments in here. So I have this stamped visible, but you could have used that action to get. I'm going to come up here to filter, and I'm going to go to blur, and I'm going to go to average. And what average does is it takes all the colors in the photograph and tells you what what the in fact average is if you put them all together in a bucket and painted them on the canvas. So that is the average color in that photograph. That is pretty close to what the color cast in it is. Hit Command or Control and the letter I to inverse it on that color mask. So this is the opposite color from the color we had before.
How'd you do that? How'd you get the opposite one?
Okay, let's go back here and do it again. Oh, it's Command I. Command or
Command
Control
I?
and the letter
Okay.
I. See, there it is.
Thank you.
That's the color cast. This is the color that's the opposite of that, which should in fact correct it. If I come up here to my blend mode and come down here to soft light,
Oh,
pretty nifty, huh?
that's cool.
All right. So if you've got a color cast on something and you want to try and bring it back so you can start working on it, that's a pretty down and dirty way to do that. There is another technique you can use, pretty much the same thing. Once again, it's a duplicate of the layer. We're going to rasterize it because we don't need to go back. What we're trying to do is get what it is. Come up here to filter. We're going to blur and average blur again. So that's the same color we got before. And I'm going to Command and Control I it again. So this is the same one that changes it. And now I'm going to add a curves layer, and I'm going to use this, which is the gray point dropper. And I'm going to click it on here, and it's going to adjust in the 3 channels. Let's look at them. In the red channel, it moved it there. In the green channel, it moved it hardly at all. And then the blue channel went down a little bit. Made those corrections here. So I'm going to click on this. I want to change it to something. You can just roll your cursor over these different things to see what they're going to look like. But we'll use soft light again. Okay, so this is the soft light. that we created, and this is the other way. So there's a little bit of difference between the two. For most things, I think this method is good and easy enough. This one is probably a little bit more accurate. Actions, and let's go down to our super sharpen and rank this up to make it as sharp as probably more sharp than you think you need. That's pretty crunchy right there. Click OK. Okay, so set the opacity to 100 and flow down to between 5 and 15 and with a soft brush. So
So where is the flow for it? Oh, that's just telling you what it's set to, but I
no,
don't see
it's
the flow.
yep. Here,
Oh.
take the paintbrush. Set the color to white. Because I want to reveal. Remember, black mask conceals,
Mhm.
white mask reveals. And so I'm saying here, keep the opacity at 100, but take the flow and move it way down. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger so you can see it. So here's the flow. And then with my brush, I'm going to use my bracket key to make my brush bigger. And here, so I want a soft brush here. And then with this soft brush, I'm going to sharpen that eye. I'm going to paint with a soft brush in white. Take the flow down a little so you can see. Bring that down. About there. Now I'm painting on the eyeball. And as I go over it, see how it got sharper and sharper?
Mhm.
Let's do it here on his mouth. See, that got it sharp. And I go back over it, got sharper. I go back over it, got sharper, and I go back over it got sharper. If I would have taken the flow up to 100 and the opacity down to that, with the opacity, I'm going to hold it down and I'm going to sharpen this piece here. And if I go back over, it doesn't change the sharpness until I let go and then push the button down again. And then it puts another pass of the sharpening in. See how just the eyes got sharp?
Mhm.
Well, on this one, the smile mouth got sharp too. So go back here and look at it big at full size. Whereas it looked pretty gross when we were at 100%. At the sides this might be printed at, the eyes don't look like they're over sharpened at all, do they?
No.
Yeah, so it looks pretty natural. So you can pick out individual flowers or leaves or whatever you wanted to add that super sharpening. And that's what that does. Getting rid of color casts is not as bad or as dangerous as we might have thought. How are we doing with that so far?
Really good. I think I have to do it a few times for
You
for
do.
me to
You do.
digest it. It's amazing, but the brain doesn't process it. But it's
Well,
really cool.
practice helps a lot. So any questions about what we did now?
Yeah, I do have a question. Okay, so you went in and you had, when you did the super sharpen, you had a black mask on there?
Yeah.
Okay, and so that usually conceals.
Yep,
but
it
so
does.
that super sharpen concealed throughout the whole picture until you painted the eyes, and then that is where it was revealed.
Yes, ma'am. Because I
Okay.
didn't want the whole thing. Like I'm looking at you right now and your background is out of focus. Well, I could sharpen that all up, but I just want to have your glasses be more sharp. So I would sharpen the entire image, mask it all out, and then bring in the white brush to begin to gradually reveal your glasses.
Okay.
Okay. And that goes back to in the real world, everything's not in focus, right? And that's part of how when we do composites, how people catch us because things are too sharp all the way through. In fact, our eyes are made so that things get out of focus, pretty much the same. And you all know if you set your aperture down, to a normal size, like f5.6 or f8, that the part that's going to be in focus is from a third of the distance in front of what's you're shooting at and 2/3 behind. Isn't that the rule in landscaping? You aim for that point that's about a third into what you want to have. And then the focus will be from that point and then 2/3 back. And that way the background goes out of focus. That's how the eye works. And all we're trying to do is copy that in most things. That gives us a more realistic picture, a more believable solution to what we're trying to pass along. All right, so this is an image. I took it into DxO to do its fringing, its lens correction, and its noise reduction. So we come in here. We've got a few problems with the image. We've got a sky that's kind of insipid. We've got some haloing that's not so great. It's, it's lost a certain amount of its detail and charm. So one of the things we can do, or I could started to do with it, go back up here to fit the screen, is I created a dodge and burn layer, which is a soft light layer. If I make it back here to normal, so you can see where I just added some darkness, but I'm running it in soft light. Remember, you can always just run your cursor up through to see what it looks like. So that's what I did to begin with. I wanted to get a little definition into the photograph. I darkened a few areas, so that's what happened here. Then I used Bob's great trick of going into Adobe Camera Raw with the same image that we had before, and basically I darkened it because it gave me a much more dramatic sky. This layer does here, and this layer mask, and we want to do some of the selections thing. There's all kinds of ways to do this. So if we know we want the sky, the easiest way to grab this is to come over here to select and select sky. And it does an amazingly good job of picking out the skies usually. You can't complain about that a lot. So if we bring it's hugging in there very nicely. What I usually like to do is come up here to my select tool, hit my modify tool, and expand the mask. In this case, let's just do 3 pixels. So see how it jumped in? So it's going to do part of that hill range. Then I'll come back again. It would select, modify again, and I'm going to feather it. And I'm going to I expanded it by 3. I'm going to feather it by 2. And I'm going to create a mask. So I'll just hit the mask button down here. Brought in the sky, and it came down, but it left the mountain ranges just as they were. And I probably got a little carried away with my amount of expanding and feathering here. You can see a little blue there in the background, and that blue is from the bottom layer. So we can take care of that. And in here, you can see not only do I have some overlap and fringing, I also have some color casts in there. I'm going to hold down the Alt key and press on each of these layers so you can see what I think I did. Maybe. See this line up here where I began to go through and do a clone stamp on the individual layers there to get rid of it. So that was my halo correction layer. And then this is one where you can probably see the effects of that grain better. So if we click on the grain, you see how we got some detail come back in the woods? Here. Can you see it in the rock face?
Yep.
See how it picks up just a little bit more detail? And here we got the grain, the fine grain and the coarse grain. But you can say, well, yeah, Richard, I liked it there, but what the heck? I don't like it in the clouds. And that's good. We can simply copy the mask. We can come down here to the mask we made for the sky. If we hit down the Alt key and click on the mask and drag it up, it'll drag a copy of the mask. It'll leave the one that's down there. And in this case, I want to invert it, Command or Control I. And now the grain that we put in has been taken away from the sky. But it stays down here on the rocks and things.
Okay, back to what were the commands to copy a mask? You click on the mask and then press.
Well, let me just get rid of this mask here. So I know this is the same thing. What I want is the same thing as I had right here. Click on the mask and you'll know that the mask has been selected because see the box that went around it.
Mhm.
So you click on that you hold down the Alt or the Option key, click on that mask, and you drag it up to where you want it to go and let go. So the mask stayed where it was before, but a copy of it was installed on the new layer.
Okay, so you inverted that mask from the one that was before.
Well, I had one, I realized that I had one here that was inverted, so I just
Oh,
copied it
okay.
across.
Now, why would you do that with the halos instead of, because you expanded by 3, would you have, if you expanded by 2, would it have made a difference?
Yeah, see that black line on the top of the mountain right there? That
Mhm,
would not have been there, or it would have been smaller.
right,
So what I probably should have done is expanded it 1 and maybe feathered it by 2, so it blended in, so I didn't get so much of a line. I would prefer to have a black line rather than a white line separating my mountains. And one of the reasons in this particular picture is I don't want, actually it shows better with ones with the glaciers on it. A lot of those skies and the snow are the same color.
mhm.
So it's hard to tell where the differences are.
Now, is the water, like it looks like it's sloping downward. Is that actually how it
No.
was?
No,
Oh,
it's not, because that was one of the things we were going to talk about, wanting to do that. The way you fix that is just go ahead and click on your crop tool and rotate, and that straightens it back out to where it's supposed to be. If that doesn't work for you, you can rotate it on a larger square and then use the command fill. So let's do that. Let me bring this out and bring this out, because I can't bear to lose any of that photograph. All right, so I've got that image in there pretty good. So I'm going to crop it here. I cropped it larger than the area so that Photoshop will automatically make a bigger canvas for us, which is a nice trick to keep in the back of your head.
So you don't have to have the content aware button filled in?
You can, or you can do it yourself only in the places where you need it. You have both choices.
when you do it with the crop tool, it automatically does it?
Well, if you do it this way, you have a choice when you get ready to crop.
It's still sloping.
Well, that's because I turned it off. I'm
Oh,
going to turn on the content aware for you.
Richard,
Yes.
since you were earlier talking about tinting, and now you mentioned that the snow and the clouds were the same color.
Yeah.
When I have water and cloud, or water and or snow and cloud, I give a slight tint to one of them.
Yeah.
Just one warmer and the other cooler.
Yeah, that works out nicely. And actually, we're going to look at tints next. But that's good. And I also use the dual processing trick with Adobe Camera Raw to help do that as well.
Yeah.
So I clicked on the content aware button within the thing, which should solve the problem for us too.
While that's working, I have a question, because sometimes when I do that in Camera Raw, you don't have that choice. It doesn't fill in the white spaces.
Yeah, I don't think they've got that developed into Camera Raw yet.
It doesn't do it in Lightroom either, Donna. So you have to do it in this.
Thanks.
Okay, now the reason why I usually would have done it the other way is it gives me more control over what's being selected for the content aware fill. This one did a beautiful job of it. So as long as we're here and talking and we're running down the clock, let's talk about that fill thing a little bit. So we're looking at this one. These were taken at a fairly high ISO, and they were done in the wee hours of the morning. And by the time I ended up processing and getting the pictures back, what happens is we lost a lot of that feeling. So one of the tricks you can do is you can take this image, and you're going to need a stamped layer to pull it off, is to come up here to image and adjustments, and you've got photo filters. And photo filters are simulations of the filters we used to put back when we were shooting film to add a color or to get rid of a color. So, and the default density is 25%, but you can see that this warming filter really warms it up. You've got several that you can work with. So if I wanted to make this more night-like, I could take it and make it deep blue. Okay, and maybe make it deeper blue. So now I have a color cast that I've added to that photograph, which gives it more of a nighttime feeling. And just saying, well, yeah, but I'm losing part of what I've got going here. So one of the things we can do is we can take a mask again. So I'm hit the Alt. First off, you saw how I brought that in. Yes?
Yeah, yeah.
And you can change its opacity to try and get the feeling that you think you want. So I've got it in, I've got a color that I'm pretty much happy with. I'm going to steal a mask that I've made before, hit my Alt key and drag it up. Bango. I'm going to use another selection. So I'll use this one here, the quick selection tool. And I'm going to make this a little larger. And look at my brush. I'm going to make this pretty hard.
And that's because you cropped before.
Yeah.
And so the other.
So the mask didn't match.
Yeah.
All right. So now I'm just going to use this tool here, which has actually gotten to be one of my favorites. So I'm collecting. And so this drags and kind of picks like pixels to put together in a selection. So I'm going to click on the layer I want, and I'm going to make a mask. And I don't know why it's doing that, but we're going to live with it.
What happens if you turn off your bottom 3 layers? All the ones from the bottom down, since you've got it visible.
But because somehow I lost the sky by doing that, and I shouldn't have. Oh,
Well,
because I've
because
got
you've
this
got
on
a
now.
mask, you've
Because
got a
I've got the mask on now.
Mhm.
All right, so there it is. That's what I want. I'm glad you all are pretty patient.
Hey, Richard, it makes me feel like it doesn't just happen to me. It happens to
Yeah, it sure does. And like I've shared with you, I practice this stuff all the time. All
I've
right.
gotten patient. I've learned that it's like it's going to work at its own pace. There's nothing more I can do.
Looks cold.
Well, that was part of the idea. But what I wanted to show you, why I keep stumbling over this thing, is that if we double click on the mask, this dialog box comes up. And what it will allow us to do is to work on the feathering of the edge of the mask right here and the density of the mask. So in this case, if I take the feathering and up it just a little bit, I should get a grayness as part of that sky should be coming down on the top of the mountain a little bit. And then if I take the density here and move it back, I can now see how they got gray here in the screen. So I can now control how much of the mask I'm actually putting down. So in this case,
It's allowing some of it to go through,
exactly.
totally blocked out. Okay.
And the idea here, once again, is to make our solutions be believable. So now we have a mask that we've manipulated after the fact. So that's a neat tool to add to our collection. So let's just try something else here. Solid color. This one is about as obnoxious as any. Here's a solid color.
But crop is back to being active again.
It really is, and I have no idea why.
Yeah, mine does that a lot too, and all I do is hit enter and let it do its thing and move on.
Well,
I just usually hit another key. I
Me
hit
too.
the little move key or something, you know.
Because
so-
see, you're still sitting on crop on your
yeah.
tools.
yeah,
So if you go up to the move tool,
He's
yeah.
off it now.
So here I've got a solid color. And what I'm going to do is click on the mask, Command and Control I to invert it so it's black. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a brush. So that's an opacity of 17. And here's an opacity of 100. Okay. And another opacity here, maybe. So I've got a mask. And the nice thing about a mask like this is I can take my dropper tool and I can pick that color. And then I can take my paintbrush tool And it should make that same color go in there, which is kind of nice. So now I've got these three bandings in here. So with that tool, double click, I can feather between them so they float into each other. See that beginning to feather out? And then I can change the density of the mask in the background so they become more or less intense. Okay, so another neat tool to add to your collection. Okay, well, didn't go quite as smooth as I would have liked, but I think we covered a lot of stuff. What's your thoughts?
Need to practice.
That was really
Me too.
good, lots of
Me too.
information. Any aspects of Lumenzia an option, or do you want it to just strictly to the Photoshop?
How many of you use or like Lumenzia?
Don't have it.
Don't have it.
Right. Either.
That's the only problem there is that, but I can talk about how it make a running pass at Tony Kuiper's panels.
Yeah, that
And we can look at blend if, because those two panels use the channels and the blend if to get their flow between the different colors. A blend if is an incredibly powerful tool that most of us are afraid of because it's, you know, it's hard to find and it's buried in strange places. So does that sound like a plan?
Mhm.
Yes,
right.
I have Tony Cooper. I don't know if anybody else does, but
Well,
And I-
Robert does, and I do.
Robert-
I don't use it. Because I use the other one. So
You
Um,
said to do a clone stamp tool and what else?
well, I use that with blend modes to get rid of the little white or black lines. So I'll try and remember to do that at our next get together because it's a really great technique.
so do
Because
you want a landscape image?
I don't
or-
care. It can be a little girl in a tutu. I mean, just something, with some kind of thing that you're facing. That way I can show you how I would solve it. It's not necessarily the only way to solve it. It's not the only way to solve it, but it is a way. And that I find that I can tell you about other tools that I'm using as I go along, which usually is more fun than my just saying, here's a tool and this is how I use it.
Can we work on importing images into Photoshop next time?
Sure. And we can talk about exporting them and sizing them. How's that? Because I know a lot of you have trouble with sizing. Someone remind me, because I'm getting long in tooth and that stuff just floats through.
Busy, so.
In that case, you all have a wonderful night.
Thank you, Richard.
And
Thank you.
the more you watch after the initial confusion, eventually he says, that makes sense.
I think I got it all, my plans all figured out now, so.
All right. You all have a wonderful night and I will see you soon.